So while Risto's getting that started, I'll go ahead and just welcome everybody. My name's Erin Centeo. I'm the current chair-elect for SIG 93. So if you're not familiar with AERA, it seems like most of you probably have advisors that are part of AERA, which is the American Educational Research Association. And then a portion of that is SIG 93, which is, y'all, Sinlin and Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it's research on teaching and learning and physical education, or some iteration of that, is our particular SIG, which focuses on physical education, but also adapted PE, CISPAP health. It's kind of ever expanding within that AERA group. So we just want to welcome you and thank you for taking the time to sign up for this grad talk. We're excited about this presentation and hearing all of your presentations today. And we hope that you'll engage in the webinars that SIG 93 has planned for the rest of the year. We have about one a month that's going to be taking place over the next couple of months leading up into the conference. And then hopefully you can become a student member of AERA and SIG 93 and join us for the online conference this next year and hopefully future conferences to come. Kevin or Sinlin, did you have anything to add while Risto was getting started?
No, thank you for framing that, Erin. Just really excited to see, we've got 45 people on right now, lots of great grad student presentations to come. I think that this is a great way for us to continue to kind of facilitate networking and opportunities for grad students to present and get their names out there and their research interests out there. A lot of these are conversations that we might have at conferences, after somebody presents, you kind of go up to them and talk a little bit and learn about what they do. And, we just don't have those same opportunities to do that in person. So, the SIG 93 executive board thought that it was important that we do our part to facilitate those conversations in other formats. And this is one of the ones that we came up with.
Yep, can agree more. What exciting day. It's Friday, and I'm so excited to see so many attendees here, and I look forward to everybody's presentation today.
Yeah, and thanks for your patience. We are all set to go and up and running. So I'll give you a brief overview here of what the plan is. So we're gonna do about an hour of talks. All of the students know that they have exactly 5 minutes or less to give their presentation. And then we'll have formal Q&A for about 30 minutes afterwards if you have questions. If you have smaller questions that you want to put in the chat, you're more than welcome to put that into the chat as a follow-up. And then once the student finishes doing their presentation, they can go in and kind of type out some answers as well. But if you have some good questions, hold those to the Q&A. Again, it would be a really good opportunity for somebody to answer that question as a learning experience as well. So you can see the order there, and we're going to get started as soon as I pass off of the first page. Then I'll start the timer, and the first presentation we have is from Anqi Deng. So go ahead.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to present my study here. To date, it has been argued that physical education is expected to help students develop the knowledge for participating in health-enhancing physical activities. So in this study, we consider cognitive load theory as a valuable extension of the constructivist learning theory. Cognitive load theory is about the burden of students process cognitive information in various learning settings and related to effective instructional process to facilitate student learning. Cognitive load theory focuses on 3 factors, which are content knowledge, learners, and instructional process. For the content knowledge factor, cognitive load theory focuses on element interactivity, defined as number of elements that must be processed in working memory. For instructional factor, cognitive load theory proposes concepts of germane cognitive load and extraneous cognitive load. Germane cognitive load leads the learner to effectively processing the intrinsic cognitive load for deep understanding of the content. And extraneous cognitive load is unrelated to intrinsic cognitive load and does not contribute to learning. For learner factor cognitive load theory, proposed cognitive architecture is essential to engage learners' cognitive processing capacity in learning new concepts. Therefore, the purpose of this study was to identify middle school students' cognitive architecture about aerobic and anaerobic concepts and pedagogical factors that might enhance or limit scientific conceptualization. According to the standardized knowledge test result, we classified the students into low and medium high knowledge group. The semi-structured interviews were conducted to identify learners' verbally articulated conceptual knowledge. Next slide, please. In the next slide, sorry. In the table on the left, we identify themes in two knowledge levels. The students from low knowledge level used 3 examples to represent their conceptualization about the aerobic and anaerobic concepts. The first one is that students describe concepts as sports or activities rather than scientific concepts. For example, one 6th grader said, anaerobic is like sit-ups and push-ups, and aerobic is like running or playing basketball. The second one is that students describe concepts as literal elements of the word aerobic or anaerobic. For example, one student heard of aerobic concept explained as water aerobics or Zumba aerobics. The third example is that students describe concepts as involving whole body or body parts. For example, 7th grade students explained that aerobic activities were those involving whole body, while anaerobic activities were those only involving body parts. The students from medium or high knowledge level used 6 examples to differentiate aerobic and anaerobic concepts. 3 examples are different from low knowledge group. The first one is that students identify concepts as breathing and oxygen intake. For example, one student described aerobic exercise is the exercise that you use breathing, and then in anaerobic, you don't breathe so much. The second one is that students identify concept as activity duration and movement continuity. One 8th grader said aerobic is like when you do an exercise for a short period of time, and anaerobic is like when you do an exercise for a long period of time, like running a marathon. The third one is that students identify concepts as physical intensity and type. One 6th grader explained that aerobic is like running and anaerobic is like sitting around in the house. As a physical educators, we feel challenged by the fact that 34% of the students from our sample claimed that they never heard of the concepts, as well as the confusions and misconceptions displayed in the interview responses by the rest of the sample. Therefore, we suggest that physical education curriculum designer and teachers should anticipate the complex challenges in teaching the aerobic and anaerobic concepts. That's all my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Even with my mess up on your slide there, you finished perfectly within time. So thank you. And again, if you have questions that you want to put into the chat at this point, more than welcome to do that. Let me introduce our next 5-minute speaker. This is Donal Howley. How did I do, Donal?
Really good.
Pretty good. All right. So here we go.
Thanks, Risto, and hello, everybody. So as researchers, much of our evidence-based work in K-12 health and physical education settings has been significantly disrupted by COVID-19. Despite this, the show still goes on for HPE teachers and students across the world who are faced with the challenge of continuing teaching and learning against the ever-changing background of lockdowns, school closures, returning to face-to-face via social distancing. Spurred by the researcher practitioner disconnect I've been experiencing, I wanted to find out what's been going on for teachers and give some an opportunity to reflect and have their voices heard. So the purpose of this qualitative study was to explore global experiences of teaching and learning in K-12 HB settings during COVID-19. Adopting a constructivist perspective, thank you, Ben Dyson, photo, voice interviews and focus groups are currently being utilized to elicit experiences of teachers in order to universally consider A, the initial and ongoing impact of teaching and learning, B, practitioner responses, C, the realities encountered, D, support mechanisms, and E, their future outlook for K-12 HBE. So early days, but to date we have 8 teachers, 5 female, 3 male, have been interviewed via Zoom conferencing across many different time zones. Australia, Brazil, China, Mexico, Ireland, USA. Their in-service experience ranges from 2 to 22 years. Of these 8, 4 have returned to teaching face-to-face. So in the next couple of weeks, I have more interviews to conduct participants from these countries and more, hopefully arrange 1 or 2 more focus groups before the end of the new year. Next slide, please, Risto. So what have I found so far? Well, to borrow an adage from my Limerick mentors, Emer Enright and Mary O'Sullivan, PE teachers and researchers have heart and care deeply about student experiences of learning, and this is showing. If nothing else, the stories I've heard and they've shared with me about their experiences have helped me as a researcher revise my own assumptions about the extent of the impact in different settings. So with my researcher hat on, I provided an early analysis of data. Early themes include teachers figuring out flexibility or indeed inflexibility. So teachers describing how they have learned to become more flexible with teaching and learning while also having to balance this with decisions about what can and can't be done, as Jean and Emily describe here. While initially restricted to just prescribing physical activity, most now have refined teaching and learning in an effort to meet learning outcomes. Another theme is the idea of connection. Connection has been described in multifaceted terms: connection to internet, connection to students, connection to colleagues, connection through physical movement, or indeed the lack of it. COVID has kept teachers and students away from each other, but in other ways it has helped some to get to know each other better and make learning more relevant and accessible to their lives. Anna's metaphor of the door here to represent her experience of teaching online is something I think we can all relate to, along with other descriptions of teaching classes with students having their cameras off or students they have not seen or heard from in a long time. With Beth, we also see how teachers are at the same time responding innovatively to try and maintain and develop this connection. Going back to having heart and caring, teachers are not necessarily prioritizing SEL or putting it on a pedestal, but more so giving time and seeking parity for effective learning during their teaching. We see this in Antonio's words, but especially in Nicole's description of the poster she designed with her students after once said they couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Support-wise, most of the support up to now has been informal and local. There are these organic communities of practice emerging, but these need to be formalized and better managed. So far, teachers interviewed have been positive about how they can continue teaching and learning with their students, but they have in particular valued the opportunity to reflect on the work they've been doing. Limitations so far, yes, of course. Small data set. Does this really reflect what is happening with every PE setting? Very ranging sample. Do teachers have the same experience, training, approaches, subjects, curriculum? Also, for many interviewed, English is their second language, so there may be some things lost in translation. But I haven't seen much of this work being done yet, and I think these initial examples I've shared with you demonstrate the need for researchers to facilitate in-service teachers in reflecting on their experiences wherever they are in the world and figure out what is the job we can do for them right now and what will work to get it done. So if anybody can offer suggestions, and many of you who are listening and watching right now actually have and been brilliant, if you have suggestions, feedback, or help to do so I can do a better job, then I'd really appreciate it. And I'd also be grateful for anybody who might be able to assist with recruitment flyers or knows somebody else somewhere who might be interested in participating.
All right, thank you very much. And I think this is exactly what these sessions are for, to get a little bit of feedback as well. So feel free to put those or any connections for Dunal in the chat. All right, so let's move right along to our third presenter, Junyoung Lee. And whenever you're ready, you can go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Junyoung Lee. So today I want to introduce one of my dissertation study. The title is Head Start Preschoolers, Fundamental Motor Skill Development, Parental Influences. Underserved minority preschoolers such as Black and Hispanic from low-income families in Head Start have been identified as a high risk of obese group and lower levels of physical activity group. Children spend most of their time with their family and learn behaviors by observing their parents and family members, so they can influence their children's physical activity, which could contribute to development of motor skill competency. As a theoretical framework, we use the Wax et al.'s conceptual model of parental influence on children's physical activity, showing parents can directly and indirectly influence their child's physical activity behaviors by providing role modeling, support, and facilitation. So the purpose of this study was to explore parental influences on underserved child motor skill competency and physical activity behaviors by using multiple case study design. As a method, this is the follow-up qualitative study from quantitative data from 260 Head Start children in Texas. One of the measurements was TGMD3 to assess motor development. After analyzing the data, purposeful and maximum variance sampling was used by high and low motor skills and gender, boys and girls. 20 potential parents were selected for follow-up interviews based on inclusion and exclusion criteria. Finally, 8 parent-child dyas participate in the semi-structured face-to-face interviews. Next page, please. 2 interviewers engage in each interview asking open-ended questions, and all sessions were digitally recorded and analyzed through MVivo. We apply deductive thematic analysis to identify the themes using theoretical framework. To enhance trustworthiness, we apply triangulation, member checking, multiple data resources, field note, and audit trail. As a result, we found 3 main themes from parents' responses. First one was parents or siblings' physical activity habits can influence children's physical activity habit development. We could find that difference between children's high and low motor skill groups came from social agents such as parents or siblings' daily physical activity habits. For example, in the high motor skill group, parents or siblings actively engage in exercise or play daily, so the children were positively impacted by parents or siblings as motivators. But children from low motor skill group did not receive social agent positive role modeling in their physical activity habits. Second one was parents' efforts can develop their children's motor skill competency. It was observed that parents from high motor skill group actively encouraged and their child physical activity, which provided many opportunities to develop motor skills. For example, they show their interest in sports and movements and provided resources to develop their child motor skills at an early age. But low motor skill groups, parents showed a lack of encouragement or support for their child. Last one was home environment facilitates children's efforts and possibilities to master motor skills. For example, parents from high motor skill group had built physical activity environments in their house or yard to stay physically active. However, parents from low motor skill group faced a lack of support to create physical environments to promote children's motor skills. As a conclusion, this study provides comprehensive understanding about what kinds of parental influences are associated with development of underserved children's motor skill competency. Additional efforts would be needed to enhance motor skills and establish healthy and physically active lifestyle. So it is important to provide effective intervention such as field funded program, parents workshops, and after-school programs. That's it. I tried too hard to summarize this study, and I had to minimize important information in 5 minutes. So we can see this research in public early next year, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And under time, perfect. So you're making up for my lost time in the beginning. So I appreciate that. All right. So next one up, we have Dong Zhang from Springfield College. So whenever you're ready, you can start.
Okay, thank you, Esther. Thanks for the opportunity. So the purpose of my study is to create a PCK-based evaluation tool to evaluate the courses in PT programs. This is not my dissertation, but an individual study I just did. So, you know, I would present my dissertation if I knew Dr. Richard is here, because it's about occupational socialization. So anyway, so this study includes 2 parts. The first part is I use a semi-structured interview method to interview 8 experts to build the tool. So I still working on this word. At first I use a model. So I said it's PCK based course classification model, but I thought model may be a too big word, so I changed this to the tool. So if you have a suggestion for this word, please help me. So after the based on the interview data and the definition of PCK and CK content knowledge, I built the tool. Okay, and the second part is an explanation of the usage of the tool. So the tool includes 5 parts. The first one is a description about how this tool is. And the second part is a subject, means all courses that are considered as to deliver the PCK or PE would be the potential evaluated subject of this tool. So for this part, I use my idea for this tool is anytime a course is aimed to teach the CK, include CK content knowledge, and could be considered as a PCK course. And the evidence for this tool is a syllabus. So it's very similar as syllabus. And but if there's some programs, they don't use syllabus, some courses they don't use syllabus, but basically need the information like syllabus, like the purpose, assessment, and goals of the class. And the very important part is critical element. So the 4 critical elements include the students need to write the lesson plan, the student needs to implement the lesson plan, and the student need to assess the children all get feedback from supervisors. And the last one is the student need to apply the experience they from the last class to the new class plan. So that should be a circle. I could now show the circle here, but I used the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 back to 1. So to the new circle. So the level box is from level 1 to level 5. So level 1 is a class is identified as a PCK class, but does not expect any critical elements for the students. So it means there's no critical elements in level 1. But to level 5 is from level 2 is asked for 1 critical elements and has go to a level 5. So a class is identified as a PCK class, but expect students to do all the 4 critical elements at a circle and repeat. So in the second part, I used a PT program as a example to use this tool to evaluate their course. So the result showed that this program has almost 40% classes is to deliver pedagogical content knowledge. But still, I haven't done anything about the validity and reliability of this course evaluation tool. That's my next step. Maybe after I publish this article. So yeah, that's it. Please, if you have any question, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And now we're going to move to Gishal Kim from Georgia State University. So whenever you are ready, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it clear? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. My name is Kicher, a doctoral student in PIC program in Georgia State University. I'm so glad to have a chance to speak in this event. So thank you. So today I'm going to present my dissertation work, which is about online education in kinesiology. At the moment, this project is in progress, so I haven't completed. I have completed data collection and is in the data analysis stage. The title of my study is on exploratory study on online kinesiology courses. In this first slide, I briefly cover the background of the study. Needless to say, online become an unavoidable option and evident trend in higher education, and it is also the case of kinesiology. To date, there were several accounts considering the trend of online education in kinesiology. Firstly, over 20 years ago, St. Pierre's 1998 anticipated that online education would become a relevant component of kinesiology. This was notable prediction regarding the widespread notion in that time, thinking that kinesiology as a science of human movement did not fit well as an online medium. Bennett and Green in 2001 advanced one step further and discussed student learning online. They engaged in the debates about whether students can learn well via online instruction and what are the best way for instructors to support it. 13 years later, American Kinesiology Association, shortly AKA, acknowledged the importance of online education and published a monograph on this topic. Manuscripts address several different issues and introduce many cases, including best practice, transitioning degree program to online, professional development, and multiple case studies in online education. Especially in terms of the status of online education, the monograph demonstrated that online education was the rising trends, and it was common at the master level courses, and it had received a top-down support for its expansion. The major problem I hope to address in this study was imbalance that exists in this topic. As presented by AKA monograph, the educators in our field already began implementing online teaching in various different forms. However, we don't know enough about effective way of teaching and learning online. Especially, there were few empirical studies that have investigated online courses in kinesiology, and none could be used as a theoretical foundation for our daily practice. This imbalance between practice and research certainly warrants more research, and this study would be part of it. Therefore, but the purpose of the study was to explore teaching and learning of online kinesiology courses, hoping to identify factors pertaining to successful online education. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to focus on methods of this study. With regard to the situation that practice have proceeded far without much of theoretical body of knowledge, and online education had received limited attention in literature, the issue of this excuse me, the issue of this study was how to close the gap between practice and research. And one possible approach is a thorough description of the action and contextual backgrounds of the real-world practice as suggested by Lawson in 2018. Hence, a multiple case study with a mixed method design was adopted. Participants of this study were 6 instructors and 57 students in 6 different courses in a PEAT program. The data were collected from online survey using so-called the community of online inquiry instrument for both instructors and students, semi-structured interview with 6 instructors, and learning management system data, which involves contents analysis and student raw data analysis. As I noted before, this project did not completed yet. The data we have collected so far apparently showed the difference over courses and gap between teachers' intention and actual student experience. Once finished, this study hopefully can reveal an image of quality and effectiveness of online courses at a deeper level. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now moving on to our next presenter, Haley McCown from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So go ahead, Haley.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for logging in on this Friday. This research is my dissertation is currently ongoing. I'm currently in the data collection phase. The title is Understanding pre-service classroom teachers' efficacy and perceptions towards implementing physical activity during the school day. So most of you know, 1 in 5 children and adolescents in the US are affected by obesity. And this leads to further complications such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and some cancers. So because of this, there has been a call for child and adolescent health as a priority. This call has been put forth by government agencies as well as nonprofit and profit organizations. Through these agencies and organizations, they have created these programs and models that enable us to look at physical activity beyond physical education class. In particular, my research looks at physical activity in the classroom setting. And yeah, it focuses on the classroom teacher. And I just want to reiterate that this is not physical education teachers, but is general classroom teachers. So there is research currently on practicing teachers. By practicing teachers, I mean teachers who are already in their classrooms teaching. And this focuses on their self-efficacy towards implementing physical activity during the school day. However, the research is lacking, the literature is lacking on these pre-service teachers. And by pre-service teachers, I mean teachers who are currently in their coursework at their university, striving for their certification in teaching. So this research the purpose of this research is to kind of give this population a voice in the literature, as well as to understand pre-service classroom teachers' knowledge and perceptions of implementing physical activity throughout the school day. This research uses self-efficacy theory and social ecological model for the theoretical frameworks, social ecological model being the primary and self-efficacy theory being the secondary. My research uses mixed methods design, so there's a combination of quantitative and qualitative data. For the quantitative data, I'm using a questionnaire that is delivered via email, and it uses the platform called SurveyMonkey. This questionnaire is sent out and it includes demographic data such as age, race, ethnicity, what year these participants are in their program, as well as questions regarding self-efficacy towards implementing physical activity. This questionnaire also asks the participants what their current physical activity levels are, what their physical activity enjoyment is, as well as content questions in regards to these programs and models that these agencies and organizations have put forth, and whether or not they're familiar with them at all. At the end of the questionnaire, they are asked if they'll be willing to participate in a follow-up interview. This semi-structured interview helps with the robustness of the story with the data. It asks questions such as, what do they think a physical activity break is? What does that look like with online schooling due to COVID-19? As well as opportunities for them to share their perceptions and their knowledge surrounding classroom physical activity. The participants in this study are from universities from all over the US, from Hawaii all the way to New York. This study uses will use quantitative and qualitative analyses. I haven't gotten there yet, and then compare the two. The goal, or this research will hopefully lead to better understand how teachers are prepared, as well as their self-efficacy towards physical activity implementation. And through that, understanding the current situation of pre-service education could lead to increased health outcomes for children and adolescents that we've talked about in regards to obesity, and how we can better help them become healthy adults and be lifelong, become involved lifelong with physical activity. So because this research is ongoing, I'm currently in the data collection phase. If any of you know or network with your college education faculty or department heads, if you're interested in having your university be represented, you can email myself or Dr. Centeo. And we are still looking for universities to participate. So if you are interested, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. And our next presenter is Ping Fan from the University of Northern Colorado. So Ping, whenever you're ready, you can start.
All right, thank you for this opportunity. And the title of this study is about is the status of physical education in Colorado. It's one of my studies for my dissertation, and currently I'm working on this study. So first, I would like to share some basic information about PE in Colorado. There is no requirement for any grade level for PE in school in Colorado, and the instruction time do not meet national recommendations. So while there are some requirements about physical activity, but not physical education in Colorado. And most of the school districts do not include language in their policies about physical education requirements or recommendations. So only 13% of those school districts includes the language in their policies. And Colorado is a local controlled state, and PE in Colorado vary widely. So school districts are able to create their own policies and requirements for physical education. And to improve physical education in Colorado, the PE4 Coalition created a model policy. It's PE for All Colorado model policy. So this model policy provided 16 recommendations about quality physical education, and some topics about assessment, standard-based curriculum, and BPA, and etc. So so considering there is no data resources about current physical education in Colorado, and I would like to explore the status of physical education in Colorado. So the PE here represents the typical physical education at school before the pandemic, March 2020. And two research questions will be explored. One is, what is the status of physical education in Colorado based on the PE4 model policies and recommendations? And two is, what are PE teachers' perceptions of the barriers to implement physical education in their schools? So next slide is about my methods. I'm going to use a mixed methods. And I am doing mixed methods right now for this study, and including two phases. One is quantitative research methods followed by qualitative research methods. And in phase one, quantitative research methods, and I did a survey data collection and a survey data analysis. So at this point, 247 PE teachers complete the survey, and 200 surveys are valid. And I using Qualtrics for the survey, send email with a link to all PE teachers in Colorado, including 19 questions. Those questions are related to PE4 model policy. And this week, I briefly did a survey data analysis, so using SPSS, and run the descriptive statistics. And next is phase two is qualitative. So working on interview data collection. Actually, I did the first interview with a PE teacher yesterday, and I'm gonna do the second after this conference. So very excited about that. And I have 13 teachers, PE teachers, using Zoom for the interview. And the interview will be like 30 to 45 minutes. And next, I will do the data analysis for the interview data transcripts using Open and Excel coding, maybe use Deduce the software for data analysis. So that's my one of my studies for my dissertation. And thank you for this opportunity. And let me know if we have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that was so 5 minutes on the dot that it was perfect. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, so our next presenter is Dylan Scanlon from the other side of the pond at the University of Limerick. So whenever you are ready, Dylan, you can start.
Great, thanks a million, Risto. So today I'm going to talk about the role of teacher agency in enacting physical education curriculum. We're informed here by Mark Priestley and colleagues' conception of the achievement of agency. In other words, agency being something people achieve rather than something one holds. And this achievement is a result of a person's efforts, the resources available, and the contextual and structural factors within a particular situation. For this study here, we interviewed one teacher named Brendan every week for the first year of his teaching of a particular physical education curriculum. Throughout the data analysis, we questioned what the achievement of agency looked like, and further, if Brendan ever actually achieved agency. We found instead that Brendan continually operated within the process of achieving agency. While I do not have time to go into depth in the figure here on your screen, it does highlight the influential interdependent relationships a teacher has in their teaching situation when operating within the process of achieving agency. For example, we can see the teacher here in the center and their interdependent relationships with other teachers, students, parents, curriculum makers, government bodies, and so on. By locating the teacher in this web of interdependent relationships, we gain a snapshot of the complexity of the teaching situation and how these interdependent relationships either influence, enable, or constrain the process of achieving agency. By redirecting the focus from the achievement to the achieving of agency and locating the teacher in this complex web of interdependent relationships, we come to an understanding that it is impossible to link the achievement of agency with one element, including the teacher. We conclude that two limitations to the understanding of teachers' achievement of agency would be one, to believe that the teacher has control of achieving agency, and two, that there is a desirable standard of teacher agency that can be achieved. With this in mind, I'm going to turn to asking what can we as a physical education community do in supporting teachers in the process of achieving agency? I will go to the next slide please, Risto. I recently did a podcast with Risto on this study, and this is a standout question for me. What can we do? I'm going to speak to two considerations here first. First, we encourage the use of communities of learners, either in an informal or formal form of professional development. In this study, a very strong interdependent relationship for Brendan was other teachers teaching the same subject. So let's capitalize on these relationships. In communities of learners, teachers can work towards collaborative partnership and allow for collaborative discourse in sharing ideas of how to work towards achieving agency and supporting one another in the process. We suggest expanding these communities of learners to include other stakeholders of the physical education community, for example, teacher educators. And by this, I mean any individual who educates teachers. So think of the opportunities and the potentialities this could have if this happened. Second, and this is a take-home message for me, we need to move away from the discourse that positions a huge amount of belief on the agency of a teacher. This study showed the minimum role a teacher appears to have in the process of achieving agency. We strongly advocate for the physical education community, that being teachers, students, teacher educators, professional development providers, curriculum makers, and so on, to work together to enable collaborative thinking, discussion, and action. They say that 2 heads are better than 1, but can you imagine 5 heads, 10 heads, heads who are practicing teachers, heads who are teacher educators, curriculum makers, professional development providers, and so on, all working together and learning together with their own individual expertise, which is complementary to the community's expertise. Such collaborative approaches could enlighten us on numerous aspects of teacher agency. For example, it could educate policymakers on the realities, not the ideals, of the role of the teacher in the process of achieving agency. And it could inform teacher education on how best to prepare pre-service teachers for this role. This may sound somewhat idealistic or romanticized, but it can be a reality. And we argue that this reality is the only way forward in supporting teachers in their process of achieving agency. I finish on a quote here from MacPhail in relation to redesigning physical education provision. We need to stop working in isolation and work with and learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dylan. All right, so moving to our next presentation, Harry Liu from Auburn University. So whenever you're ready, you can start.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to join the 2020 AERA SIG 93 grading talks. Thanks to Dr. Rusto and the AERA SIG 93 committees to host this event. The title for my study is Can Sport Education Increase Students' Attendance in a High Autonomy Climate, Club-Based College PE? This study adopted the transcontextual model to explore how sport education impacts students' changing attendance behavior in a high autonomy climate, club-based college PE. The participants and class came from a college PE in central China, and this physical education class was organized in a club format in this university. And club-based PE has already been implemented in this university for more than 5 years. The traditional PE is scheduled once a week, and each lesson lasts 80 to 90 minutes. The club-based PE combines several classes into one big club so that they can provide more than one lesson each week to the whole club, to all of the students. The previous club-based PE was organized in a direct instruction method. A typical lesson in the club begins with a basic skill demonstration by the instructor. Students practice with their teacher or independently after the teaching demonstration. There will be some pickup games organized by their physical education teacher in the club. In our study, a basketball club has been selected from this university PE program. There are 5 lessons provided each week across 15 weeks. Each lesson lasts 90 minutes. According to their class policy, students can accumulate to 12 times attendance to earn 70% of the grade in their PE class. They can come to any lesson, any week, once they have achieved 12 attendance in their PE program. They can have the majority of their grade in the PE program once they have their 12 attendance. Back to our study has integrated sport education elements into this basketball club, which provide a season option to students. I want to explain a little bit more in here for sport education model to the audience if they are not familiar with this model in our area. Dr. Staten Top from Ohio State proposed SE model in 1982. Sport education has 6 features: seasons, affiliation, formal competition, record keeping, festivity, and culminating events. Sport education aims to help students become a competent, literate, and enthusiastic sports person. Looking to the bottom right of the slide, in our study, the first 5 weeks are no different from the previous club-based PE. Around week 4, the teacher will inform the students that they could find their classmates to build a team to join a game season in the 35 weeks. Students who don't want to join a team to play a game season will follow the direct instruction in the basketball club to finish their semester. Look at the table in the PowerPoints. We can find 248 students decide to join the season in this club. 31 female teams and 46 male teams came up after week 5. For our individual cohort, 47 students want to play by themselves. We have a total of 17.82 attendance has been recorded in our sport education cohort, while 15.61 has been documented in our individual cohort. One more thing I want to point out in here, this club was used indoor facility in this university so that the course have a swap machine and booking system. With the booking system and the swap machine, the instructor and the teaching assistant also has been documented out of class team practice if students want to reserve a court to play basketball out of the club. 15 female teams scheduled team practice across the semester. At the same time, 27 male teams documented team-based training in this club. For our dependent variable and independent variables, club attendance has functioned as the dependent variable. For the independent variables, we have perceived autonomy support from PE teacher and from their peers. And the autonomous motivation in the club and autonomous motivation to continue participate after required attendance also measured in this club. Then serial plan behavior, for example, attitude, perceived behavior control, and subject norm and intention also measured. So for the independent variable, all those measures consist of transcontextual model. This model aims to try to explore how PE context impact students to continue their sport behavior in other specific context. So in here, the PE context is this club required 12 attendance. And the special context in this study was students continue to participate after they received their 12 attendance. So the data, let's move into the next slide. So the data has been checked with ICC first, then confirmatory factor analysis, and structural question modeling has been conducted within N+. Look at the result of this figure. We found teacher and classmate support can positively impact students' motivation in a PE context. The motivation in the PE can transfer to the motivation after required attendance, then moving to a strong perceived behavior control, intention, and finally change their behavior, which means more attendance came to this club. We believe the sport education elements in this club significantly change students' physical education attendance more than their individual peers. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And we're going to move on to our last presenter, which is Stephanie Benny from Brock University in Canada. So Stephanie, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Risto and team, for putting this all together, and to everyone for being here today. So as mentioned there, I'm a doctoral candidate at Brock University in Ontario, Canada. And basically what I'm sharing today is a little portion of my doctoral research project. So I'll start with a little bit of background on that. Basically, my research is focused on both teachers' professional learning about and implementation of the meaningful physical education approach. So this is essentially a collection of features and pedagogical strategies that are designed to promote an explicit prioritization on meaningfulness in physical education. So this is a teaching approach that I've used quite extensively in my own teaching practice, and as sort of a next step, I wanted to introduce it to other teachers and then sort of study their experience of learning to implement it in their classrooms. So I recruited 12 elementary physical education teachers here in Ontario over a period of 2 school years, with a small group in year 1 and then a larger group in year 2. And as I said, my research has focused both on their experience of the professional learning, but also on implementing it in their classroom. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the implementation piece today. Next slide, please. So essentially, it is my aim to examine teachers' experiences through a cognitive framework of teachers' sense-making in the implementation process. So a focus on sense-making basically prioritizes the cognitive component of the implementation process, in contrast to more traditional implementation theories that have sort of a behavioral lens and focus more on what teachers do. So the specific framework that I've referenced here from Spillane and colleagues basically suggests that there are 3 components to teachers' sense-making processes when implementing an innovation. The first is this idea of individual cognition. So basically, teachers' prior knowledge, beliefs, experiences, their values and emotions, and all of these things are playing a role in how they're making sense of the innovation. Second level is the idea of situational cognition. So considering the teacher's situation or context as more than just a backdrop, but actually an influence or a factor in terms of how they make sense of the innovation. And lastly, the role of representations. So essentially looking at the way that the approach is being presented to teachers and how that relates to their ideas about actually making changes in their practice. So importantly, I should mention that this particular framework has been used primarily in and was designed for studying teachers' implementation of policy. And I think that's an important distinction because teachers in my study were voluntary participants who were presumably involved because something about the approach that I was asking them to implement resonated with their teaching philosophy. So it's a little bit different, but at the same time, I see in the data analysis, which I'm fairly early in my data analysis stage, but to me, I see a lot of connections between this particular model of teacher sense making and how teachers in my study were sort of making sense of this novel innovation. So for example, in terms of teachers' individual cognition, I found that a lot of teachers in the study tended to interpret what were maybe new ideas in relation to their current teaching practice and come to see some of those things as familiar. So teachers would make a lot of comments about, oh, we're already doing these things in our practice. I've always taught this way, that sort of thing. Whereas when I was making observations in their classrooms or speaking with them in interviews, it felt to me as though some of those things were not a regular part of their teaching practice, or at least that there was some room for growth. So in the way that teachers interpreted some of those aspects as being familiar, it sort of served to maybe inhibit their growth in some ways. So essentially what I'm suggesting is that analyzing teachers' implementation through this lens has the potential to provide some insights into how innovations can be presented to teachers in ways that might enable their sense making and hopefully ultimately lead to sustained change in pedagogical practice in PE. So I am early, as I said, in this stage, and I'm very open to suggestions, comments, feedback, and my email address is on the slide if anyone has anything to share. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Stephanie. So we are now going to move to more of a question and answer session, and we'll go approximately 30 minutes or until we just run out of questions. If you don't want to speak or you're not in a place that you can speak, you can post that question in the chat, and then Kevin Richards and I will kind of look through the chat and go through and pose those. But I know some of you may have another meeting right now, so I will just put a plug for our special interest group, SIG 93. If you are not a member, we really do encourage you. We'd love to have you join the community. It's a really great place for presenting the research in our field of physical education. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and if you have a question, you can put up your hand by going to the participants and raising your hand, and we'll go through that way, or you can just do this, and I'll see you on the camera, and I'll call on you, so we can go low tech or high tech. Go ahead, On.
Oh, I need to unmute it. Congratulations to all the presenters and the fantastic work, and really eye-opener to see future doctoral students' work and in the making here. I have a question for Liu, and I have a question for Benny. What's Stephanie, right? So what's Liu's first name? Okay, Mr. Liu. The sport education model, and when you put it out there, the outcome measure, the dependent measure is attendance. Question number one is, why pick attendance as the outcome measure? And other than that, what else are you using as dependent variables or outcome for the sport education model?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Angchen, for your question. So the dependent variable and independent variable we have presented in our PowerPoint. So we choose attendance because that's the most reliable record from this class. So they have the swipe machine, and the student came to the class. They have to swipe the machine, then we'll document their attendance in the club because it's a huge class. So we have total 300 people, students in this club. They combined four classes in one club. So that's why when we try to, so the original model from transconnection model, they measure the self-report physical activity in their leisure time. But for this basketball club, it's a little bit different because they have required attendance for 12 times. They can have their 70% of their grade in this PE class. And then most of the time, based on the conversation with the PE teacher, most of the time students finish 12 attendance, then they'll stop coming to the class. And the purpose for the club was to try to encourage students to come more, to play more, then can build good habit with their sport engagement. So that's why we are thinking, so if students can come more, which means this class attracting them, motivating them to come to PE. So that's why we choose attendance. For the independent variable, we used transconnection model. So this model has 3 series feed consist of this model. So autonomy support and motivation in PE and in special context, and then plan of behavior. So that's why we measure those variables as independent variable. It's based on the theory.
Thank you. My next question is for Stephanie, I guess, last presenter here. Could you elaborate a little bit on the situational cognition for teachers in relation to sense making, and also in particular for individual cognition? So how you tear those two apart, saying one is individual, one is situational?
Right. So basically, the individual cognition is essentially looking at sort of what might be considered individual factors, which obviously presumably are influenced by the situation, but basically what the teacher is bringing to the context in terms of their prior experiences, their knowledge, their beliefs about teaching or whatever it might be, their values, their emotions, all of those things that might be considered sort of individual factors. And then also considering that in light of the situational, the cognition, the context in which they're actually teaching. So, you know, for example, some of the teachers, all of the teachers in my study were from one school board, but they all had very different situations in which they were teaching. They were all bringing different levels of experience, those sorts of things. So kind of considering their individual, what they individually were bringing to the study, but also where they were teaching, who they were teaching, how their students reacted, those sorts of things, and how that influenced how they were making sense of the innovation.
Thanks, Stephanie. Other questions?
Risto, I've got some from the chat. Would you like me to throw one of those out?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so before I do that, I just want to echo everybody else's comments that from the chat and what people have said out loud as well. Really appreciate everybody coming to support the grad students, doctoral students as they presented today, and really excited about all of the wonderful research that everybody's doing. And you know, a specific thank you as well to Risto for getting this organized for us. So I kind of tried to pull in some of the questions from the chat as they came up. So here's a question for Haley. As your potential students are pre-service teachers who are not yet situated in public school environments, how is the social ecological model incorporated into your inquiry?
Yeah, so similar to the answer that I gave in the chat, it just has to do with, well, I chose the social ecological model because it has more to do with the influences that these pre-service teachers have on their current behaviors. So similar to the answer in the chat, if you already read it, things such as their previous physical activity or physical education experiences, or their coursework faculty and things like people that have influenced their current self-efficacy or attitudes and perceptions of physical activity. I've seen a lot in the data so far that if these pre-service teachers have had influencers like educators, teachers, faculty, anyone like that that does enjoy physical activity implementation themselves, then these pre-service teachers are more likely to enjoy it as well, or be more open to implementing that when they get into their classroom. So as the social ecological model has a lot to do with the influences on these pre-service teachers.
Thank you, Haley.
Yeah.
So we'll keep going with some of those questions from the chat. I do, again, encourage anybody, even the presenters, if you want to ask another presenter a question for clarification or future plans, or even to give suggestions on where you think some of the in-progress dissertations could possibly go.
So I've got a question that I actually came up with myself for Ping. So in Ping, I'm sorry if you explained this or said it as you were going through your design, but thinking about your kind of sequential methodological approach, starting with quantitative and then going into the qualitative, I was curious if you could talk about or reiterate if I missed it, and I apologize if I did, if you're using any particular way to select the interview participants based off of the participants' answers to the survey questions.
I do. So I did not talk about in this presentation, but I do use some kind of criteria when I choose participants for interview phases. So I considered grade level, elementary, middle school, high school, and we have Colorado. We have charter schools and some participants, like they are K through 12 schools. So I selected 5 elementary school and 3 middle school, 3 high school, 1 K through 12, and 1 charter school. And I consider the regions. So there are 8 regions in Colorado, like across Colorado. So I'm gonna pick a 1 or 2, like here and here, from each region. Unfortunately, only 7, but not too bad, 7 regions, participants from 7 regions are interested in interview, and the last region, so no interview, with teachers from the last region. So do the purchase interview with PE teachers from 7 regions instead of 8 regions. But not too bad. 7 is like 7 out 8 is fine for me. And I review their survey data. So like their assessment, equity, their reduce the free lunch percentage. So I go over the survey data and then pick the participants from them.
So Ping, I have a kind of follow-up question.
Yes.
You talked about there's no specific requirements for PE in Colorado, but then the 2016 document that you shared was a PE policy document, but it's a local control. So how does that, because I don't know anything about Colorado in that way, how does that get implemented? So is it a mandate? Do all of those different places have to follow this, or is it kind of just like, hey, there's a website that has this document, I hope you read it and follow it?
Yeah, so that's like a requirement, not mandated. So it's go here. That's the quality physical education should look like, but in a very detailed, like elementary PE 150 minutes, 225 minutes for secondary PE, and like using assessment, so assess students' learning regularly, and MVPA achieve 50%, and model like a policy, and funding, school funding, school district funding for physical education at schools. So those are their 16 recommendations. So that's the recommend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, or should we keep going to questions from the chat?
Hi, yes, I am Stacia Magby. I'm a doctoral student here at Louisiana State University, working under Dr. Senlin Chen. I had a question for Haley and her SEM approach. I wanted to know, are you just looking at the intrapersonal level for the pre-service teachers? Just that one level?
Great question. No, this is going to include pretty much all the levels, because I'm looking at, I'm touching on policy and then how administration plays into that, and how these teachers are influenced by their circumstances at the schools, right? So if there's no opportunity for them to have classroom physical activity breaks because of someone else, then that will definitely play a role in it. Great question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Stacy. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so I've got one for Donald here. Since you shared about SEL, for future outlook, did teachers share any potential considerations for infusing SEL into their lessons?
So I didn't necessarily prompt the question. This was coming from the teachers themselves, and we're talking about, I mean, you could say these were things that you would expect maybe of a typical planned PE lesson. That the teachers talking about, well, at the beginning I actually spent more time checking in with students, or one teacher spoke about I really focused on self-awareness with the students, getting them to understand the situation they are in and how they are feeling, and how to self-regulate themselves as well too. as I said, I don't want to present it as the fact that there's been this giant shift towards SEL with teachers. I think it's more a case of trying to put it maybe on giving it more kind of parity within the teaching and classes. I mean, I have teachers that said to me, you know, I've been teaching these kids for 5 years and I realized I never knew them because I didn't know where they lived. I didn't know what access they had, that they lived in the 4th story of an apartment in an urban area, you know, and all the things that I did with that particular student wouldn't have been relevant for them or accessible. And so these kind of this shift in SEL, I guess, that I'm talking about is not a dramatic one, but teachers are I guess the teachers I've interviewed so far were saying that, you know, I made a much more conscious effort to pay attention to you know, constructs of SEL, not the entire, not in a comprehensive way, but certain elements like self-awareness, like self-management as well too. So I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah. So it wasn't my question; it was one I pulled out of chat. But
yeah,
with the response, yes.
And then I know Anne McPhail there and Peter actually asked me a similar, or they had the same question as well too, about, you know, these problems, I guess, that are arising for teachers, and a lot of these are actually ones that have pre-existed, so before, and have really only been accentuated, I think, by just the situation that teachers find themselves with. And in a lot of cases, teachers have been left, I guess, with no other option but to pull their socks up and actually look to address these realities that have existed for a long time. So there are some, but there are also some as well too that you know, are very unique contextual cases or situations that have cropped up. You know, teachers buying phone credit for their students so they can actually access class content, kids zooming in live from supermarkets because it's the only place they can get Wi-Fi, you know. So you know, there's a mishmash of what's going on, but you know, a lot of the things that teachers talked about were things that we've been talking about for a long time that really are front and center right now for teachers.
Thank you, Donal. So another question for you, actually, if you don't mind going back to back. This one just came into chat from Claire Walsh. Could you share more information about your data collection, particularly the photo voice aspect?
Yeah, so I made the photo voice aspect is obviously I made that decision because I was conscious of the language barrier. And I wanted to be able to give participants an opportunity to at the very least represent their experiences through these pictures. Now, of course, I didn't want them to use human subjects at this time, and that actually was a huge problem because teachers, nearly every teacher took a picture of being at their desk with their laptop, and there's 20 names in front of the screen and there's all this information and stuff. So these, you know what I mean? But this was how they began their conversations of, this is how I teach now. The selection of photo voices, I said, was to try and allow the teachers this opportunity, I suppose, to elaborate on their experiences. But again, the responses I got were all, you know, I think 1 or 2 teachers took pictures of their actual empty classroom because that's not the classroom anymore. And I think with regards to just the ethics of it, because I removed human subjects from that, it made it a lot easier. And I know there was a lot of teachers I spoke to that said, well, I have loads of pictures, but there's kids in them and I can't share those with you, you know. So in one way, the photo voice allowed the teacher to express themselves, but at the same time, it hasn't necessarily allowed them to show the real world or really what they're doing with their students as well.
Thank you, Donal. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get your name right, and I apologize for that. So next question, and I'm sorry if I get this name wrong as well, is for Anki. And it's actually 2 questions that I'm going to kind of combine because I think that they're somewhat related. But is your research also a contribution to understanding physical literacy? And then why is it important that students can talk about the differences between anaerobic and aerobic exercise as opposed to being active in one or both of those approaches?
Yes, I think the primary goal of physical education right now has been acknowledged as help students become physically literate individuals, which I think the new Shape American National Standards, the first time adopted physical literacy in the national standards. So I think some scholars identified knowledge acquisition are considered to be a core element, as well as one of the key attributions of physical literacy. So I think this research can contribute to the research that understanding students' existing knowledge about aerobic and anaerobic concepts. And guided by cognitive load theory, this study also can lead to some specific pedagogical implication for teaching fitness concepts. And for second questions, I think understanding the difference between aerobic and anaerobic exercise is the key for middle school students to choose the right exercise to achieve their fitness goal. And also from the political side, Shape America also specified that the ability to differentiate between aerobic and anaerobic capacity is a benchmark for students as early sixth grade. So that's pretty much my answer for these two questions.
Thank you very much. I think Tim Fletcher had a question for Donal. Oh, for Dylan. I'm sorry, for Dylan.
Yeah, hi, and thanks everyone for your presentations. Really enjoyed them. So Dylan, yeah, just wondering how teacher identity, particularly if we think of the external influences on identity, impeccable timing from my dog there, how is teachers' identity caught up in the idea of agency? Because a lot of those external influences seem to be really prominent in that framework. So I'm just wondering, is identity sort of embedded in this idea? Is it sort of tangential? How does that play out?
Yeah, great. Thanks a million, Tim. So the achievement, we follow Priestley and colleagues' notion of the achievement of agency. And they say for the achievement of agency, it's a combination of past, present, and future aspects. I suppose teacher identity is built on your teaching biography. So that's the past. And that very much influences how you operate within the present. Things that influence your teaching identity, such as relationships, the context you're in, your views, values, and beliefs, all happen in the present. So it is a combination of the past, your teaching biography, the present, all those different elements, and in the future, how you plan for short-term or long-term goals related to student learning, for example. So identity is very much centered within a combination of all three, nearly. What we argue in the paper is one of the main focuses which captures all three is relationships. And I suppose relationships very much can either direct your teacher identity and influence your teacher identity as well. So relationships would capture teacher identity as well for us.
Thanks, Dylan. So Junyoung, on your slides at the very end, you talk about efforts are needed in the future to enhance the motor skill of preschoolers. Mm-hmm. So you put some options there, but if you were approached by a person who actually has the power to implement this, mm-hmm. One, what would you implement? And two, would you advocate for that to be a certified and licensed physical educator, or are there other better ways to do that?
So based on my perspective, so I went to there, like I went to the Head Start centers, and the facilities are very not supportive. So physical activity environments is not very supportive compared to the other preschoolers. So that I would love to change some facilities, and I would love to more put efforts in teacher education as well in the Head Start, so that they can implement their knowledge and their some movement skills into their curriculum as well.
All right, great, thank you. Other questions? I think we've gone through the questions that have been proposed in the chat. We'll do a good old Zoom silent 5 seconds, and if we don't hear from anybody, there we go. Kevin, go ahead. And Peter, do you have one? Go ahead.
I think Peter was doing the same thing I was doing. He was getting ready.
I have more of a comment that's sort of just a general one for everybody. If you want a really good encapsulation of life under COVID, go to the CNN website called The New Normal, which of course there's questions about whether whether normal is really appropriate. But anyway, there's just an amazing set of images. It's just like if you're bored out of your brain and struggling, just do CNN New Normal pictorial. It's absolutely magnificent. But one of the things that came up on that, I'm presenting at a conference in Indonesia next Tuesday. My session's actually at 11:05 p.m. because of the time zone difference. But they asked me could you do 9 o'clock? Okay, that's fine, because it's 8 o'clock here. And then, oh, someone else can't do this. Can you do 1 o'clock? Check. Oops, it's 13 hours difference. But one of the things that they're looking at, one of their themes is, the new normal. I'm sort of trying to deconstruct that a little bit. But one thing that would be interesting for Donald and anybody to think about as framing some of their stuff is most of the content is changes in work, changes in home, and changes in social life. But for young people, it would be changes in school, changes in home, and changes in social life. Some of the kids here in Alabama, they made the school buses wireless. So if they can't get access, they have these school buses parked around the place. And they toddle off down to the school bus and they pile in the bus, and that's where they can get their wireless and do their classwork. But we're nearly mostly face-to-face down here in the South. Here in, and Alabama is one of the 5 states where it's actually dropping in rate.
Thanks, Peter.
I'm happy to know that Australia had its first 3 days in a row of 0 cases.
Looking forward to that here as well. So thanks everybody for coming on today. Thank you for the comments. I'll stay on for a little bit for the presenters. If you want to go through and you haven't had a chance to go through the chat to look through it really quick. I know Hal Lawson dropped in some information there as well that maybe if you haven't seen, it's good feedback for you going forward to present. Again, we wanted to provide this opportunity for you all to be able to present with the lack of in-person conferences, with the lack of maybe 2 years of doing in-person or virtual conferences. We want to provide these opportunities. So if you have other colleagues out there that are coming up on this graduation or data collection phase, we're planning another one in January to have another networking opportunity for you. There's a lot of people on this call. Some of them have left, some of them are here. You should feel comfortable emailing these people and asking questions. We're here to support you as while you're in a grad student or early career phase. Ask questions if you need support. It's a great community and you shouldn't feel uncomfortable or feel like you shouldn't be emailing these people. We're here to support you in any way possible. So thank you, everybody. Again, last plug here for membership in AERA. If you do just go in and become an AERA member, just make sure you go through the next step to also find our SIG, which is another step, not just renewing your membership, to go in and actually click that SIG 93. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.